What up, guys? So today on the podcast, we are going to talk about an idea with confidence, and I think that when we get into it, you'll realize that, to me, it's rang pretty true throughout my whole life. And when I look back on things, it's pretty much a rule that I have for confidence. And so we'll get into that in a bit, and hopefully this will help you guys, whether you're dealing with injuries coming back to the mat, whether you're getting a belt promotion and you're dealing with imposter syndrome, or maybe you're just playing around with a new position or something in jiu-jitsu and you feel very unconfident about it. Or really, you can take this idea anywhere in your life and gain some confidence from it. So hopefully this is helpful to you guys. As always, thanks to our sponsors that help make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web is the CBD of my choice. It's the CBD product I prefer and the one that I've been using for several years now. If you guys have never tried any of their products, I encourage you to go to their website at charlottesweb.com. Take a look around at whatever you're interested in, and then you can use the promo code Jiu-Jitsu20 to save 20% off. And they recently had a cool thing happen where they got endorsed by the Major League Baseball, which again, they have a banned substance list, right? And I know that a lot of people are wary of using things like CBD because they're wary about popping dirty for something that it isn't actually what you're taking, right? And they recently had an endorsement from the Major League Baseball. You can tell how much I watch sports ball.
Mhm.
I can barely say it. But with that, one of their products that they have now is now endorsed by Major League Baseball and has been NSF certified. So NSF is a third party sort of testing company that goes in and tests supplements. So you can go on the NSF's website and you can basically get a list of all these different supplements that you can take if you're in a position where banned substances are a problem. So for instance, if like UFC fighters or Olympic athletes or whatever, if they have to do something and they want to take a supplement, a lot of times they won't play around and they'll get a supplement that's been NSF certified, because sometimes supplements can have trace amounts of stuff that, again, you don't know that it's in there. And again, that's something I've talked about on this channel multiple times, or this podcast multiple times, when I talk about Charlotte's Web. They're third party tested. And by the way, that particular supplement that's NSF certified, for, that again is endorsed by the Major League Baseball, is Charlotte's Web Sport Daily Edge. And it's dosed at around 25 milligrams per milliliter. And again, that's the one that has that, if you guys want to check that out. But even there are other products that aren't endorsed by Major League Baseball or whatever. The rest of them are still third party tested to ensure the quality and the purity of what's actually in there, which very few CBD companies do that. A lot of them just throw whatever they can throw in the bottle, and whatever you get on the other end, who knows? So again, if you guys want to get I mean, it's just the way it is. It's not regulated. It's a non-regulated market. And so people can get away with fudging stuff in there and you don't know. And again, for me, when I take supplements, I'm very picky because I want to know that if I'm taking this is what I'm getting. So if you guys want to check them out, you can check them out at charlottesweb.com, and the promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 to save 20% off the order. Also, if you guys want to check out some sweet jiu-jitsu gear or jiu-jitsu merch or whatever you're looking for, you can check out my buddy Matt's website at epicrollbjj.com. He has a lot of really cool designs. He has good quality gear, good quality t-shirts, comfortable t-shirts, the whole thing. And you can check him out. He is a jiu-jitsu black belt that makes jiu-jitsu gear for jiu-jitsu practitioners. And again, if you go to his website, I'm going there actually right now to look around for you guys. And if you guys go to his website, you can check out the different stuff that he has. One of the things that's kind of cool for any of you ladies out there, he has female versions of all his shirts too. So a lot of times, like women, one of the things that you unfortunately get subjected to being in a male dominated sport is that, like when people make stuff, they make stuff for guys because there's more guys buying this stuff. And unfortunately, like again, to hold product and stuff like that, it's a little bit more inconvenient to like have a bazillion different sizes and different, whether for male or female.
Yeah,
and so they've got a lot of women's. So a lot of their most popular shirts, like some of the ones that you guys have seen me wear on the YouTube channel and everything else, they have those in women's sizing and cuts as well. And again, if you guys want to check out the stuff that I'm talking about, you can go to epicrollbjj.com. The promo code is Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off the order. Also, if you guys want to support the podcast directly and get access to some really cool content, plus a few cool bonuses, you can go to the website, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. When you join up on our Patreon, not only does it support, your bearded YouTube coach that is on YouTube and, the podcast, as well as his bearded assistant, Mr. Eugene.
It's me.
And along with supporting the podcast and helping us out, you'll get access to a bunch of exclusive content, and you'll get 2 free bonuses that we give away upon sign up. One bonus is a warm-up routine that is focused for jiu-jitsu practitioners specifically, with ideas on how to improve your mobility and strength in certain areas. Again, it's been very much tailor-made for jiu-jitsu practitioners and targeting very specific muscle groups that plague us. Again, there's every sport has issues. Every sport and athlete tends to have certain problems compared to others, and jiu-jitsu athletes tend to have a very specific set of issues more often than not. And Eugene put together a routine to help target those. It's a 20-minute like sort of warm-up routine that you could use and learn from. Check it out. Also, you'll get a seminar that I recorded about several years ago, which goes into gi and no gi techniques that I shared with people. Again, it would have cost you $80 to go to the seminar, and you get it for free upon joining the Patreon. And last but not least, guys, you can join my Chew Crew email list by going to the website at chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. Upon joining, you will get 3 free ebooks sent to you. One is on jiu-jitsu game plans and making your own. One is on a drilling ebook, and one is a guide for doing some at-home workouts and studying. I originally created that one during the initial lockdowns for people to have some idea on how to kind of keep some jiu-jitsu movement going when you couldn't get to the gym and work out, and also some ideas on studying jiu-jitsu from videos and stuff like that, because that was an option as well. So you can check that out, even though you're not locked down anymore, hopefully. I don't know that there's anybody still doing it. Who knows, though? Even though you're not locked down anymore, it's still useful stuff that you can apply to your jiu-jitsu and your study game. So you can check that out, again, by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join. And guys, with that said, let's jump into this idea today. So this originally sort of was sparked because I was talking to one of my students who was telling me, Chewy, I'm having trouble with like confidence. And he was talking about a particular position in the gym that he was having confidence with. And I told him, I was like, listen, you don't have a confidence issue. You have an exposure issue. You don't have a lack of confidence. You have a lack of exposure. Because you think about it, in most cases, the things that we're confident about are the things that we have the most exposure with. When you feel confident with a position in jiu-jitsu, for instance, it's not like you feel confident immediately, right? I mean, if you did, that would probably be more of delusion, not confidence. Or maybe you would have the arrogance of ignorance. Again, a lot of times people that are ignorant, and by ignorant, I don't mean like stupid. A lot of times people, they think of that word as ignorance. Ignorance has kind of a mean connotation that a lot of times people associate with it. Ignorance, I'm ignorant about a lot of stuff. Ignorant just means that you're just uninformed, right? So like when I first got into jiu-jitsu, I thought I was going to be amazing. And I thought I was going to be a blue belt right out of the gate. I was arrogant because I was ignorant. I'd never trained jiu-jitsu. What happened? As soon as I got into the mats, I got my butt whooped. And I was like, oh, now I'm not so confident about myself anymore. Now I had a wake-up call, right? And then slowly I became more confident as I had more exposure. And so again, you gain this confidence through exposure to things. And so I told him, I was like, look, if you don't feel confident about it, that's normal. That's supposed to happen. You're not supposed to have confidence yet. But you put yourself into the position, you gain exposure.
Yeah.
And then that's where you get the confidence. And you can think about how this idea about confidence, this rule for confidence, if you will, applies to other areas of your jiu-jitsu game. For instance, when you come back from an injury, a lot of times people will be gun shy because they don't want to re-injure that particular area. I know that for me, when I had a nose break about, was it 2014 is when I had the nose break?
It's been a while.
Yeah, 2014 is when I had the nose break. I remember I broke my nose. It was brutal. It sucked. I was off the mats for several weeks. And then I had to ease myself back into training over the course of like 6 months, because from what I was reading, it takes a long time for those little bones up in your nose to really fully harden. And so I didn't want to re-injure my nose. And so again, it took me a while to feel comfortable shooting it on legs and going for takedowns and not having that trauma that was associated with getting my nose broken like pop up. And the way that I did that was slowly exposing myself to more and more amounts of stress. So I would originally I would just drill my takedowns. And then I eventually started doing the takedowns with training partners who, could go nice and light with me, and then started working my way up. And as I got more exposure, I got more confident. You can also think about how when people get belt promotions, they go through imposter syndrome, right?
For sure.
I mean, I was thinking about this with one of the videos that I was doing recently, which maybe you guys might see on YouTube. The purple belt and the black belt are the two belts that I think create the most anxiety in people's minds when they get promoted, right? Like blue belt a little bit, brown belt a little bit, but purple and black, I think those two belts are the ones that create the most anxiety. It's what I've experienced in my jiu-jitsu and with my students. It's what I've seen. And with the questions I get from people, those two belts are the ones where people get the most anxiety because, purple belt, a lot of times when you come in as a white belt, you're like brand new. And then you go with the purple belt, and purple belts seem like they're just like untouchable. They're on a different level. And then when all of a sudden you get to because again, jiu-jitsu progress happens so slowly that by the time you get to your purple belt, you don't necessarily feel much different. You're like, I kind of feel like the same person. I don't feel like I'm up to the skill level of that person that I was, getting beat by maybe 3-4 years ago.
Sure.
But you probably are. Just, again, you can't necessarily roll with that person from 3 or 4 years ago because they're getting better too, right? And then when you get to black belt, a lot of times, a lot of people associate the black belt with a very powerful feeling. And again, for people who poo-poo on the belts and say belts are meaningless, whatever, most black belts, I'm not saying all, but most that I've met, they don't poo-poo on their rank. Their rank to them is not meaningless. It's not the end all be all, but it's not meaningless. And again, when we place that rank on someone, it's a big deal. And so then when that person says, I'm a black belt, they don't just think about their gym. They think about just the wider world that they are now compared to. I'm a black belt compared to all these people. I know when I got my black belt, I did my first competition soon after, and I'm in the bullpen. Or actually, this was my second competition. My second competition, I was in the bullpen with black belts who I had watched when I was like a purple and brown belt winning high-level competitions. And I'm like, what am I doing in this bullpen with these people? I don't feel like I belong. Now, I did pretty well in the competition and took second. So I was like, well, maybe I belong where I belong, that kind of thing. But again, what happened with my black belt and my purple belt is I got out and competed. I traveled to gyms. I traveled in the gym or I traveled to other gyms to roll. I rolled in my gym with, the black belts and the purple belts. And as I rolled with these people and did these things, I felt better and better. And so I understood. I was like, I'm right where I belong because I got exposure. So again, confidence doesn't come from not doing anything. This is the idea. I shared this the other day, that ideas about something are not transformative by themselves. Actions are. You're transformed not by the things you think, but by your character. And so when you're trying to add confidence, when you're trying to gain confidence, you don't gain confidence through ideas. You can't think yourself into confidence. You're not going to will yourself it's not going to work through affirmations. I am confident because I've done this thing. It doesn't work. You're going to get confident by putting yourself out there and doing things, by getting exposure to these things, getting exposure to these ideas, getting exposure to these situations. That's where you gain confidence. And again, as I said before, you can use this idea for pretty much anywhere in life. I know that I have pretty much any time in my life where I'm faced with a situation where I've reached the edge of my comfort zone, where I'm all of a sudden, I'm like getting that anxious feeling because I'm like, I don't know, because I don't normally do this, or I've never done this before, and I don't know how it's all going to end. I mean, that's really what's going on. Even like when you guys think about imposter syndrome is really just you coming to the edge of your comfort zone. Right. And I really like a quote that I heard the other day, which is your life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. Right. And I would think of it more as you really discover who you are and what you're capable of at the edge of your comfort zone. And it's at those moments when you're at the edge where you're now in like uncharted territory most of the time, and you don't know how things are going to work out. And again, when you throw yourself into it, a lot of times that anxiety helps. It can, if you allow it to, helps you make you better because it lights a fire under your butt to go harder, to push yourself to be better. But again, in my life, there's been several times where I have been faced with really difficult choices that made me feel very unsure of myself. And I always kind of came back to, and this is one of the beautiful things, and we'll talk about this in a second, about sort of general confidence. I put myself into these situations that put me on edge to the point where I wasn't sure about myself. And then I would kind of reflect back on like grappling, because grappling was like one of the first places I really developed a deep sense of confidence. I would reflect on grappling. And every time I was faced with a difficult, uncertain situation, no matter what, if I threw myself into it 100%, I always did all right. Even if the outcome everything wasn't ideal, I still did really well. And so I was like, you know what, just throw yourself into this. It's okay. It doesn't matter what happens. We'll be all right. And to sort of tie this back to general confidence, right? I don't know that there's a such thing as being a generally confident everywhere, right? Because again, if if you're truthful with yourself, as you move from place to place to place, you will have confidence in some places and not have confidence in others. So, for instance, a lot of you guys that listen probably obviously know that I'm getting more involved in horses and both riding and learning how to train them and stuff like that. It's kind of something new that I'm getting into. And I am very unconfident with horses. I mean, I can get by and I can ride them, but like I'm unconfident. I'm very new to it, right? And so again, it's not something I'm confident in because I haven't had enough time to be exposed to it. I'm gaining confidence slowly but surely. But again, when I stepped into that horse, first got on the saddle on the horse and I'm riding him, I didn't feel confident. I felt very unconfident because
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing. But I'm confident in my ability to continue forward and gain that confidence, to gain that exposure and to improve, right? So it's not that I have a confidence about the thing, but I have a confidence in my ability to do things and my ability to stick with them and eventually get better because I know how the process works, because everything that I've done in life basically happens the same way. You get into it, you feel really awkward, you feel very weird, and then you keep doing it and you get better at it. I mean, this is whether you're talking about playing off of your back as a wrestler in jiu-jitsu very early on to, throwing yourself into a business and quitting your 9 to 5 job to talking to girls. It doesn't matter. It's all the same.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it just is. And so again, that's the idea for exposure and confidence, right? Again, don't look at it as like a lot of times if people think that they lack confidence, they feel like it's a mindset issue and they need to fix it by like mentally thinking about it and whatever. And I'm not saying maybe that's not the case sometimes because people can definitely undercut themselves. But in most cases, you don't have a confidence issue. You have an exposure issue. And as you gain the exposure, so too will you gain the confidence.
Yeah. Do you think that's the only way? I mean, that's probably the main way, but doing things outside like visualization and maybe studying, I think those things, just having a more thorough knowledge of a situation, whatever it is. It could be horse riding, right?
Yeah.
You may watch videos or you may like study or read books and stuff on even just going to like those horse riding shows, right? Not even participating, but watching how it's done, right? I mean, I think that's a way to build some confidence indirectly.
Well, I think that you can have an overall knowledge and that can lend itself because you are getting more exposure.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think it has to be oriented around action because again, ideas are there, right? I mean, think about it this way, like people can they can watch videos and gain information till the cows come home, right?
Right.
Like forever, but that doesn't necessarily transform them. That doesn't change anything. It gives them more information, but unless that information is applied, what are we doing? Right. It's like, I mean, I could go and watch all kinds of videos about like doing what you do with physical therapy.
Right.
But if I don't have that hands-on training of actually working with people and diagnosing issues and stuff like that and developing those skills and that intuition from that, I'm not going to have confidence with it. Like, I'm gonna be like, I don't know. I think your ACL is blown out. It's like,
Yeah.
my shoulder's hurting, sir. But
Yeah.
I mean, so because it's the same thing. Like for instance, here's an example of that. I remember when I got into jiu-jitsu, like I watched videos and stuff like that. I mean, granted, we didn't have the kind of videos we have now, but we still had
Right.
some stuff available. I'd watch fights and I'd watch their grappling and stuff like that. And I had a couple of videos where I could watch grappling matches, a few of them. And I kind of had a good idea of how the positions worked, and understanding that helped me more rapidly understand and apply jiu-jitsu. It made that better because I understood how things worked. You could think of it as, let's imagine we have to teach American football, because I know we have international listeners. Imagine we have to teach American football to someone. We have two people. One person has never watched an American football game. They don't know anything about it. They don't know how it works. The other person is like a super fan of American football. They're in all the sports leagues. They know all the rules, everything else. If we have to teach those two people American football, who's going to learn faster? The person that already
Yeah.
knows the structure. They already have the framework. Now, when they step into the field for the first time, they're still going to be completely lost like the rest of it. Yeah, you know how this game works, but you've never been smashed by someone in full gear running at you like a freight train. Because the
For sure.
first time you get hit, it's going to be like, oh, that's different, right? Like it can be kind of scary. So you're still going to deal with all that stuff. You just may more rapidly pass through some of those phases because you have a better knowledge of it. But ultimately, like I said, action is the most important thing because you have to take action with it. And so the ideas and the knowledge are great. And I think that a lot of times in our society, we get very heady because we think that our head is like our brain and our thoughts are the most important thing, and we can change our mindset, whatever. It's like, again, it sounds good, but if it's not combined with action, it's essentially worthless. This is why I'm such a big proponent of like of being an executor, not a collector. You can execute on one idea and it's worth more than a million ideas that are just collecting and sitting on the shelf of your brain, right?
Right.
So if you execute on one idea, it's more powerful. And so action's transformative, ideas are not, just by themselves.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right in the fact that like having a knowledge, a background knowledge of the task or the activity or whatever you're learning is very important. It may move you along a little faster because you know the purpose, you know,
Right.
like the ideas, the goal of this particular task. When you were talking about just like, injuring your nose, right?
Yeah.
And the one thing that if people don't realize, it was like a graded exposure. It was like, first I got to make sure I can move around and I feel good. And then, all right, now I can drill. Now, where's the thing? I think you got injured maybe on a scramble of some sort. So
Well,
like,
I shot in for a fireman's carry,
there you go.
and
So
Jengus kneed me in the nose.
right. And so like that whole situation of like, I get a lot of questions on the YouTubes about like injuries and getting back to it. And man, a lot of the fear with jujitsu for a knee injury, for example, is like the standing game.
Yeah.
Standing up. Like, well, where do we start? Well, usually on the ground. Like we start, in a match or any other situation, but in the gym, a lot of times, whether it's we're working a certain technique or there's not enough space, we may start on the ground. And so again, exposure there, right? So if we don't get enough training as it is on the stand up initially, like you're already going to be a little protective, a little guarded. And if you injure yourself in that, there's just a lot, there's a lot of variables. And so I think like you said, the very graded exposure, start with just drilling, being able to shoot in again and not feel like somebody's gonna, because that fear is there, and that fear in a lot of these injuries can make you more susceptible to injury. Not specifically the nose,
100%.
but like a knee, right? Well, if you're not minding what you're supposed to be doing, you're not executing it the proper way, you maybe don't commit, then what's going to happen is, well, you may be out of position or you may hurt your other leg. Like a lot of times with these knee injuries, you have a higher risk of injuring the opposite side. You don't even think about that as an issue, but like you have to really be prepared, and that graded exposure, like you said, is just so important. And those stages of like exposure, those are different for everybody. Like when are you gonna be comfortable going full on competition or tournament, right? Going 100%. That's different for everybody. Depends on, how well your recovery went and where your mental state is.
Right. You talked about like injuring it because it's on your brain.
100%.
How many of you guys, like, just thinking about this, how many times in your life have you like it doesn't have to be just jiu-jitsu, but you think about something that you're trying to avoid or that you don't want to say or you don't want to do, and then the more you think about it, what happens? You do the damn thing. Like I could think about in competitions, for instance. There was one competition in particular where I was watching a guy's video and he had a really good sweep from full guard. This was as a black belt when I was a brand new black belt, and I got so focused on his sweep and just thinking about how to defend that and whatever. Guess what happened? As soon as it got, he swept me with it by the damn sweep that I was so focused on.
Right.
It makes me think about, what is it? The Carl Jung quote, "What you resist persists."
Yeah.
The more you resist it, the more it like lingers around. And I think that really what it is when you're going through that graded exposure, like you're talking about, starting at like a low grade level of stress when we're doing drilling, and then we speed it up little bits by little bits. What we're really doing is we're reminding our body, because again, understand this, our brain and our body are all connected. They're not different. They're not separate. Right. If I feel pain in my fingertips, nerves send the signals to my brain.
Absolutely.
If my brain's doing something, I then send it down to my fingertips. Everything's connected. And so when you experience, and I've seen this a lot of times with people who have had different types of trauma, like for instance, I've seen women who have had like physical or like sexual trauma come in and train. And sometimes they will have situations where their bodies get really, really tense. Now, they know that everything's fine, mentally, but their bodies have this learned thing where they lock up when some person is grabbing them in a particular way. And it takes a while for their bodies to adapt to it and like let go of that old trauma that they had, that learned trauma.
Yeah.
And so when I was getting back to shooting in with my newly fixed nose, there was that, like, it's like mentally I know that, you know, I did this thing. I've shot probably thousands upon thousands of times since I was a teenager, and not once had I ever broken my nose. Not once had my nose ever been kneed. Not once had I even seen anybody have a similar injury to me like that. That happened one time out of like thousands, right? Hundreds of thousands of examples that I have to choose from. Not once did I see it. But that one time instantly sears in my brain and my body this fear and this trauma. And so essentially, again, mine was very much, I don't want to compare my trauma to a sexual abuse, survivor type person or anything like that. It's nothing like that. But again, the same mechanism is there. The body remembers it. So even though I'm shooting in and I know that this is perfectly fine, there's this like apprehensiveness in my body that's going on. And it's like I had to drill that out of myself over time. And again, you do that by, like Eugene's saying, graded exposure, where you start off light and then you work it up slowly. So this way, what you're doing is you're letting yourself know at varying levels of stress, hey, everything's okay. It's fine. We're not going to get our nose broken. It's okay. And the more you do it, the more you basically, essentially, you overwhelm the leftover remnants of that feeling that was associated with getting my nose broken, right? It's just being overwhelmed by feelings of, oh man, my shots are feeling smoother, I'm getting better, and everything's back to normal, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of the way that it works. I remember when just another kind of idea with this is kind of a strange one. I got jumped when I was in 7th grade. Like I was 12 years old and I got beat up by some 16 and 18-year-olds. They beat the piss out of me, broke my nose the first time when I was a kid, although that one was just like a straight break. So it didn't have to be adjusted or fixed.
Yeah.
And so no big deal, right? So it just healed up, but it made me terrified of walking down the street, just on a sidewalk, because that's where I got jumped. So it took me forever to do it. But again, the way that I got over that was, again, graded levels of exposure, because I remember it started when I was getting ready to lose weight for wrestling. I was a junior and I started running like laps around my block. And I remember like eventually like I got comfortable with that. And then I could run a little bit further, because again, just running around your block endlessly gets really boring when you're trying to run like several miles. But then when you start extending the thing, and then every time it was like everything's fine. And so eventually my brain, I'm still a little bit vigilant when I'm out and about the streets and stuff, which is probably a good thing, but I'm still able to, but it eventually overwhelmed the fear that I was having. And now obviously I don't have any fear when I'm just walking down the street. It's a similar idea.
Sometimes as a young kid, you're not quite aware. Like for me, like my brother was actually had his eye broken, like his eye socket broken. He was walking in our neighborhood and somebody like jumped him. And so for me, not even directly
the neighborhood you guys live in now?
No, this is like,
I was like, damn, dude, you guys live in a good neighborhood.
And I was probably like, he's probably like 18 or something. And I was like 12, right? 12, almost 13. Oof. But like, I remember like walking down the street with a group of people like in our neighborhood. And like, I remember cars going by and I would like almost like try to hide behind people. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what am I, like, why is that happening? You don't even realize you're doing it.
Right.
And I was just like, I had trauma from seeing what he had to go through, and he had to have surgery on his eye to get it fixed, you know? Like it was crazy.
Does he know why they jumped him?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe they said, I don't know. They were young kids. Who knows? But it was just a weird situation. So for me, like I can understand indirectly, like just seeing that, I was like, because I remember I didn't know what I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I didn't really realize, why am I like so nervous to be walking, or kind of almost resistant about walking outside, even in the daylight, right?
Yeah.
And their car drives by, and every time I'm like really hyper aware of a car or something. So it's just one of those things, like our body, like you said, like remembers it. It's like, it's like a protective mechanism. I was like, well, I don't want to experience that again. It reminds me also of like you read Hickson's book, right?
Yeah, Breathe. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so when he was like, he basically got like somebody got on top of him, tight pressure on top. He was a young kid, and like he started freaking out and he tapped. Yeah. And he's like, I never want to do that again. So he had his brother roll him up in a carpet and leave him there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he rolled him up in the carpet and left him there for like 10, 12 minutes or something, and made him like freak out and like kind of breathe through it. And then eventually he got past it. And I think that's the same thing. Like, you see a lot of people tap out or from pressure or from like,
Right.
not they're getting choked, but like
The
even
fear of it.
my son was like, my daughter and like their cousin was like laying on him, and he was on his stomach, and he's like starts freaking out. And I was like, I saw he was like actually got upset about it. And I was like, dude, you gotta relax, you gotta breathe. You can still breathe, right?
You got to breathe.
Work through it.
Yeah.
And so like it's just one of those things, like you have to expose yourself to it. You can't avoid it, because eventually like you're gonna end up in that situation. You don't want to panic.
Right.
So
In the fear of that thing is a lot of times far worse than what the actual thing is.
Right. Yeah. Not the ability of like, you start doing shit like to mess with your head. Like, I'm trying to move my arms. I can't move my arms. Well, what can you do? Well, you can breathe, right?
Yeah.
You can still breathe. That, if you feel a little pressure, but you're fine. You can get that air in your lungs. You're fine.
Yeah.
So it's just like one of those things, just teaching. And that shit, my wife's got that stuff. So I wonder like if it's like passed on generationally or something, you know what I mean?
I don't know.
Some weird like trait or something like that.
I've seen people
I have no
about
idea though. I'm just talking, out
of course, we're just talking about, I've seen stuff where people talk about like generational learned trauma, and whether it's something that comes through the body or if it's something that simply they pass down through their actions, and who knows. But I wouldn't be the best person. I know that a lot of times as kids, we absorb lessons on how to deal with things from our parents, right? So if our parents if they get really wild, like over small random things, we have a likelihood to inherit those kind of traits because we learn that, that's how you deal with small things, right? Like when a problem comes your way, you flip out, right? And so you have, not everybody, of course, but you have to be careful about that, because if you start taking on those traits, you need to be very mindful of whether or not you want to keep those traits. And I that's something that I think about all the time, is like, and this is just kind of off topic a little bit, but kind of on topic, is as a human, you get to decide who you are in a big way. Of course, there's some things that you can't decide, right? Obviously, we all have certain genetics, and and we have certain things. I'm not, like, for instance, I can't be 6'5". It's just not going to happen. That's not the way things work. But as far as like the way that you speak, the way that you present yourself, the way that you react to things, everything can be adjusted and changed. You're the master of your own destiny, and you can present yourself to the world in any way, shape, or form you choose to be, for the most part, right? I mean, you can get in better shape, you can not get in better shape, you can speak differently. Like, I mean, you think about like actors who can change their voice, and they sound like, you'll hear a British actor that sounds like perfect like an American, and then you hear him speak, you're like, bro, they've got it down. Even like me, I remember I used to have a bit of a drawl with my voice, like kind of like a little bit more of a southern twangy thing going on, and I do, some of my words still have a southern sort of thing to them, but for the most part, I don't have a very strong accent, and that was done intentionally. I didn't want to have one. And so I think that you can always kind of keep that in mind, because as we get older and stuff like that, I mean, I don't know if everybody does this. I start to like ask myself questions like, why do I react to certain things this way? Because I don't want to. I don't want to react to things these ways. I don't want to flip out about these small things, or I don't want to, even like going back to, why am I hypervigilant when I walk into a room where I'm scanning everything? And it's like, do I wish to take this, to keep this trait, or do I want to change it? Or, again, like that, why am I so claustrophobic? I was claustrophobic when I was younger. I remember when I first started jiu-jitsu, I used to tap out to mount all the time because I didn't want to be in the position. And my coach eventually, Mike put me in the position and told me I couldn't tap. I had to deal with it. He told me to breathe. You couldn't tap. And again, it goes to that point, like, why do I tap out to being claustrophobic when nobody else is doing it? Do I want to tap out to? No. I don't have to. Then I can change this, And so I think that jiu-jitsu sometimes can be a beautiful sort of analogy or parallel for that, where you can change a lot of things about the way that you react, a lot of things about your game and everything else. And that same sort of attitude can also be taken towards pretty much anywhere in your life that you want to change things, because you have the power to do that.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, kind of alluded to it, but what were some of those things, that the choices that were difficult for you, or situations that you have to kind of to deal with to become, you said there were some things outside of jiu-jitsu per se that were difficult choices you have to make, situations you have to kind of, it could be even, doing the videos, right? Was there some resistance to doing videos initially, like becoming
Oh, you mean
this thing?
you mean being at the edge of my comfort zone
Sure, absolutely. I
and
mean,
then making short, yeah.
the horse riding was one.
But like for me, like some of the more difficult situations, right? Well, I remember like when I started doing the jujitsu stuff full time and started like quit my 9 to 5 job. That was really tough because I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. And also like, I didn't know anybody that was doing this stuff full time for a living. So like, I'm doing something that like, I have no idea who's actually doing this, like the way that I want to do it. And I've got to create something brand new. It's a weird place to be. Um, the videos, they took a little while for me to be comfortable doing them. The technique videos were always relatively easy because I'm just doing technique. It's whatever it's normal, but like actually talking and being able to talk out ideas and share personal philosophies and share ideas that I consider important. And then, that whole thing. Of course, anytime you put out videos where you are subjecting yourself to the approval of the masses or the disapproval, there's going to be a little bit of discomfort there, at least initially. Later on, you start to realize that it's not that big of a deal. But in the beginning, it can definitely be very nerve-wracking. I remember, um, breaking up with certain women when I was younger, and separating myself from them because they were intruding on what my dream was, what my dream was and where my goals were. And I had to think about like, sometimes you'd have those questions in your head. Am I doing the right thing? Is
Mhm.
this the right, thing? Cause this is what I want to do, but is this the right path? Because everybody else seems to be doing other stuff and I'm wanting to do this. Is this good? And so there's a lot of those things that would happen like that, where you're in positions where you're not really sure of what to do, where the path isn't quite clear.
Yeah.
And then you have to do something. And then again, then there's like things like in jiu-jitsu, when I got my purple belt, obviously I didn't feel comfortable. Got my black belt, I didn't feel comfortable. When I started teaching jiu-jitsu classes as the head coach, I wasn't comfortable. I remember the first competition that I ever coached full time, or that I coached, when I was considered the head coach. I think it was the first competition you did under me.
Yeah.
It was at the whatever, dude. I was so nervous that morning. I remember I was like, I was having. If you, this is kind of gross, but if you guys ever compete, you'll have battle craps, right? Like you
Sure.
got to get up and use the
Dude,
bathroom a
the
bazillion times.
bathrooms at a jiu-jitsu tournament are horrific.
Yeah, they are.
That's
Yeah.
always the case. I
Yep.
don't know about the women's, but the men's are just, you're like, holy hell,
The
man.
women's aren't any better.
I
I've
wouldn't
asked.
know, but
I've asked, right? That same
oh, dude.
mechanism that gets us all amped up, it affects them too.
Yeah.
And so, I was going through those same things where like I'm like constantly having to use the bathroom before my guys were competing because I was so nervous because again, here I am. I don't feel sure of myself. I'm like, who the hell am I? I'm just Chewy, and now I'm trying to get these guys ready for a
Yeah.
competition, and I'm like, I don't want them to fail, right? Because again, if they fail, that's a byproduct of me coaching them. Everybody did pretty well, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'm okay, So there's always been these sort of things, and my life's riddled with them. You know what I mean? I mean, even think about like I remember going on a date with Jess for the first time. I remember, the first time I ever met Jess, I got so googly that like I sort of like lost my ability to speak for a second. I was like
Mm.
looking at her and I'm like, she's like, hey, and I'm like, you know what I mean? Look, it's so, and
And you
then
like speak literally in front of hundreds of people, all the time, and
yeah,
thousands of people on the internet, like, so you're talking to one person, you're like, oh shit.
right now I got these two blue eyes looking at me, and I'm like, it's like, oh, that's nice, very very nice,
Yep.
whatever.
Yep.
Shit, so stupid. And then obviously, and then when we started dating, I remember the first the first time we ever kind of went on a date together was like kind of nervous, but not nervous in a bad way, but like, all right, I don't want to screw this up. I do like her, so hopefully this goes well. Um, not that isn't necessarily whatever, but again, it's one of those situations where you have anxiety and you're not sure how things are going to work out, and you
Sure.
just got to trust yourself that everything's going to be fine, whether it works out or not. Going back to the gym business example, I remember it was like I wasn't sure how the darn thing was going to work out, and then sure enough, it was like the universe, God, whatever, started putting things in front of me, and then all of a sudden, all these opportunities started to pop up, and things worked out even better than I expected.
Yeah, that fear of failure too, like your self-worth is another thing to look at.
Hmm.
Am I worth this purple belt? Am I worth this black belt? That's a big thing. Like I don't remember feeling so much. I know purple belt was a big belt, but I don't. It's been a while. I got my purple belt, so I don't. Longer for you, of course, but black belt's fairly fresh, fairly new, and I still sometimes think like, am I deserving of this thing? Am I because now you're a black belt, but you're also like you had that feeling of like, am I able to coach these students? Am I worth it? Am I good enough? Like
Hmm.
we're like, am I good enough to represent my coach who's, who goes out there and competes and does these great things is a big staple in the jiu-jitsu community. Like if you go somewhere, like people know you and in turn, like they kind of know us. Oh,
Right.
you train under Chewy. You always hear that. Oh, you know Chewy. Every dude, I'm telling you, everywhere you go, every gym, like they'll put it together. Where do you train? Louisville. And you're like, oh, you get to that
Yeah,
point eventually
yeah,
because they ask who your coach is. So it's like pressure on us in some ways. Like
yeah.
it is because you want to like,
Yeah, you want to
you
represent well.
want to represent well and like you want to be a good person. You don't like you want to be someone that shows up at the gym and that's like a positive influence on that gym wherever you go. And that leads back to, oh, we got a cool gym back home if you guys want to come visit. And usually it's
Hmm.
the way it goes. But
Yep.
um that's another thing. Like that's a different type of pressure to kind of carry that. It really is, man, because like if nobody knew who the hell you were, even though there's lots of great competitors out there.
Sure.
Lots of black belts are phenomenal. They do really well. You do well, but you also are kind of like, going to ADCC, it was very obvious. You could see that people knew who you were and they're walking up to you and they're like, some were freaking out. It was pretty hilarious, but I loved seeing that. It's a wonderful thing, but like there's some pressure associated with that. And your self-worth is one of those things that you kind of question. And I think the more, you put yourself out there, obviously it gets better.
Hmm.
Um, like I want to ask you this though, like at black belt, what was one of those things that you had a hard time overcoming or that you feel like you were struggling with and maybe how you kind of moved past it?
Trying to think. You know, one of the things that's happened, this is more recently, is I'm getting, and again, I don't want to beat a dead horse with this thing, but I am getting older, right? I'm 37 and, things just happen as you get older. We're all familiar, right? And I'm noticing now that like, and this has been, I'm coming to grips with this, that like a lot of times, like I don't have the ability to train as hard as I used to for as long. I can still train hard, but I can't train as long. And I have a hell of a time that I didn't used to with younger people who have that gas tank that young people have. I mean, if you want to
Yeah.
think about it, just like their heart rate like can actually go higher than yours and they can push themselves. It's just the reality of the situation, right? And their recovery typically is going to be faster. So, we have to, as older, you have to be a little bit more efficient. And you got to be smart about the way that you expend your energy. But just coming to grips with that as I'm aging, I'm not always going to be able to put it on everybody all the time. It's tough for me to grasp because again, even I think some people even like and expect that sometimes. They're like, oh, Chewy's gonna, Chewy can put it on me or whatever. And then there's sometimes where I'm like, man, I don't got it. I don't have it today. I'm tired. I'm beat up or banged up or whatever. And not having that ability to just keep moving like I used to, where I used to be able to wear out the young guys. Like when I was 32, dude, you give me a young guy and I'll work him. I'll work him to death. I'll just like out horsepower him. Now it's like, all right, I gotta be smart because like I'm working with like a little bit less gas tank than they do. Even I'm in good shape, I'm working with a little bit less, and I've got to be very particular about the way that I use my
Yeah.
my energy. And that was something that was hard for me to deal with because it's like it was honestly like my body it was used to going at one speed, and then literally I was feeling that no longer that wasn't working anymore. And that was hard
Yeah.
to like, it was hard to wrap my head around because I'm like, this has worked for the last like, almost 10 years. Why is it all of a sudden not working? Why am I just getting so exhausted and I'm getting burnt out? And, and even like, sometimes I can literally feel that I've overexerted myself and I have to chill,
Yeah.
like literally like too much. And so I'm like, wow, it's hard for me to wrap my head around that. Like, okay, listen, you've got to change your game. And so that's something that's been hard to deal with. That again, it's not so much of a confidence issue, more of like just it's a hard thing to deal with because when we come to know ourselves in a particular way, we really come to like that, or especially if you like it, right? And so I kind of liked that version of me that was, very fast moving and just had a gas tank for days and can just push the young guys to the limits. And I can still push the young guys, but I have to do it differently. And again, that just kind of is me coming to terms with, as I'm aging and changing, just making sure that I'm doing so accordingly.
Yeah, I think it's just coming to grips with our mortality in some ways. It's like there's certain miles that our body can take. Some people can take more, some people can take less, but eventually it's you have to adjust it and, yes, come to grips with it, but also like having the ability. And jiu-jitsu allows that in a lot of ways, allows you to kind of, all right, let's go back to the lab and let's create and let's adjust our game plan and make a game plan that's maybe more conducive. All right, I'm going to play this way against these young guys that can move a lot. So in my age or same condition, whatever, I can maybe do certain things differently. But I agree with that too. Like one of the guys that me and Dustin haven't rolled a ton lately, but like when Dustin's quite a bit younger than me, I feel like he's one of our black belts. And he's got a gas tank on him, man. And I was like, we would battle it out. And like, I was like, I had to change my game. I knew that when I rolled with him, I'd slow him down. I was like, I can't go like to this shootout with him because I get worn out. And so like I remember that specifically. He's one of the guys that would always just like go nonstop. And I don't know how he's gotten older too a little, but that was one of the guys that I would think about that situation with.
Right.
And,
well, and also too, it's like your priorities in life. Like you've got 2 kids and you've got a career and all that. You got like a business you have to run, all this stuff. Like you got a lot on your plate. He's still a single guy with no kids.
I know, but dude, it's like it's just so it's so fun though. It's like so fun to think about and to have a game that can counter that and still be effective. I think it's so cool, but it's just you have to come to grips with it. Yeah, like I can't go drinking the night before and then show up at jiu-jitsu the next morning and be fine.
Yeah, you can. Just don't expect to feel great.
I did that once, and I remember I was like 26, and I was like, "Oh, this is not fun." It was kind of fun, but it wasn't fun, But at 26, you can handle it.
With
not
drinking,
at 39.
With drinking recently, I've like I don't really drink much anymore because like I don't feel very good.
I don't either.
Like I drank a beer with you out in Vegas, like a beer or 2. And then like literally for you guys listening, a beer or 2. I'm not like making a joke. It's not like, oh yeah, we drank a bunch. We're just gonna, it's like literally we were at a sushi place, a beer 2. And that didn't bother me, but for whatever reason, it seems to be like when I drink bourbon now, sometimes it seems to affect my sleep. Whereas like I had a glass of wine last weekend when Jess and I we went to this really good steak place, and I had a glass of wine. The glass of wine didn't seem to affect me, but it's weird. Like bourbon seems to have shifted where it seems to be affecting my sleep. So I haven't really been drinking much at all this year. It's like maybe like once every maybe month or something. Like I'll have a drink, and that's about it. So
is there anything you're seeing in I was going to ask you about like just black belts in general, like with us, for what we've told you, like as far as promoting black belts, you promoted quite a few now. Is there a common trend that you see like that maybe you get that we'll mention, like, oh, we're not ready for this, or kind of what do you see from black belt? I'm just seeing if there's any commonalities.
Yeah, it depends. So I mean, some guys are they know they're ready. You know what I mean? Like there's some guys that are like obviously they're in the thick of it and they're like whooping up the brown belts and stuff like that. So it's very clear, hey, it's time for you to get promoted, or they're competing and they're winning big competitions as brown. It's like, okay, time to move on. But a lot of times, especially with people that are like more, I would say, hobbyists. And I don't use that term derogatorily in a derogatory way. I just mean that it's their hobby. They're not in it all the time, and that's just what they're going to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of times for them, I think that because all of us naturally compare ourselves, it's not always the best thing to do. Sometimes it can be a decent thing to do to compare yourself, not with a hardcore judgment, but just to like sort of see how you measure up. But we all compare ourselves in some way to the people around us. And so a lot of times what will end up happening is the hobbyists will compare themselves to the competitive bruiser, or the basically they'll compare themselves to our high standard, right? But there's a spectrum there, of course, but they'll compare themselves to the high standard. And when they do that, it's obviously creates a problem because now we're no longer under, we're not dealing with apples and apples, right? We have maybe a 20 something year old competitor early 30s competitor who's training all the time and
Yeah.
eats, breathes, sleeps jujitsu. And then we have someone that trains like, 3 days a week, but they've been training for like 12, 13, 14 years. And it's like, well, that you're still ready. It's just, again, black belt's one of those belts, especially too, where you will see a wide variety of skill. You see it with every belt, and this is true too. But again, black belt, like we associate with like very, very high level jujitsu. And again, it should be. I
Yeah,
don't,
for
I
sure.
don't, I don't think that black belt is that everybody should just get a black belt. I think it's something you should have to earn and you should have to measure up to. But that said, you will see a very wide variety of skill in jiu-jitsu. I mean, the skill in jiu-jitsu at black belt is just as wide as it is from white belt to black belt. I mean, there are times where, as a black belt, unfortunately, we may go against someone who makes us feel like we're a purple belt again. You know what I mean? So it's just like, damn
For
it.
sure.
Now there's less of those people, right? I mean, there's very, like, for instance, if I go against someone like JT Torres, JT made me feel like I was a pretty good purple belt. You know what I mean? Like, because he's on a different level and he's keeping me out of position. I can make him sweat a little bit. I made him work, but it wasn't like I had a lot of trouble being offensive.
Yeah.
You can look at someone like Gordon Ryan, and again, love him or hate him, depending on how you feel about the guy. You watch him, it's almost like watching a black belt roll with like some blue belts, or a purple belt. It's like they give him some trouble and they maybe off balance him a little bit, but they're never really offensive in the game. And so again, that spectrum exists there too. And again,
Yep.
so it never really ends in jiu-jitsu. No matter how good you get, there's unless you're certain people, there's almost always going to be someone better than you. And so yeah, I mean, like that. I mean, that's the thing I've seen with most often with black belts is that people will judge themselves based upon these sort of archetypes that they have for the
Yeah.
belt. They have in their mind what it is to be a black belt based upon what they've seen others do. And then if they don't feel like they measure up to that, even though their experience with black belt's going to be very different, they still have this feeling of imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah. The imposter syndrome, like feeling like because like you said, black belt, it could be, you could be a black belt for a year and go get somebody that's been a black belt for 20 years or 15 or 10, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Since they start training at a young age. So there's such a spectrum there. And I think like you see black belt as like this ultimate, I mean, it's obviously the ultimate belt. I mean, once you get longer into it, there's different belts as well, but it's just like it's the thing that you look at when you're a white belt, you look at purple belt as untouchable,
Mm-hmm.
and then as your purple belt, you're like, oh my God, black belt is how could I ever get there? But you're almost on your way there. Like you're more than halfway there. So it's just one of
Mm-hmm.
those things like that it seems like it's out of reach, but then once you get there, you're like, oh man, I thought this was unattainable.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, but it's something like you said, you got to sit with it. You got to be in it. You got to compete. I feel like you have to compete. And I'm saying that for myself too, because as a black belt, I want to compete. I need
Mm-hmm.
to compete. I'm getting myself ready, mentally ready to do that. But like, I feel like to solidify it, to at least see where I stand, I think it's important to compete a little bit, and you're getting a little exposure and you're seeing what it is, and getting off on a tangent. But like competition for me is always a great way to see where I need to work, what I need to improve, or what I'm doing well, and what areas kind of I'm dialed in, and what areas I still need to need more growth in. So I don't know. It's just one of those things, like I said, exposure and doing it, being there, being a black belt, sharing the mats with other people as a black belt, you start to become more confident and kind of more like you belong.
Sure. And sometimes, along with it, there's sometimes just a little bit of lag associated with it. So for instance,
Can be.
a lot of times as we change and transform ourselves, transformation happens typically very slowly, right? Like transformation in other areas, right? Like, is very quick. You can
Yeah.
download an app and it's different. You get an update on your phone, instantly changes.
Yeah.
A butterfly or whatever you want to call it, a caterpillar becomes a butterfly relatively quickly, transforms over the course of a relatively short amount of time. Humans transformation typically is a very slow thing, right? Like think about like when we lose weight. When we lose weight, it's a very slow thing. I mean, you don't
Yeah.
lose a lot of weight really quickly. I mean, if you do, it's not generally a good thing. You're typically losing like maybe pound, 2 pounds a week. And so this weight just sheds off you so slowly. And you only really realize that you've lost weight until it's like already after a certain point when you're like,
Yeah.
you've thinned out a lot, you're looking down, you're like, whoa, I look smaller, and you're still having trouble even understanding that you are a smaller person. And it's like this with gaining weight. Like you'll get bigger, and then you don't even feel like you're that much more muscular. And someone will say, man, your arms look huge. And I'm like, really? Oh, okay. Right. And so even like our abilities as black belts, right? Like, you get in jiu-jitsu and you get better so slowly that you don't realize it. And all of a sudden at some point with time, you start to realize that you have crossed a certain threshold of being at a certain level. But a lot of times there's lag, because as we transform ourselves, the body is doing it. And then again, the body will always catch on faster than the mind does. The mind generally has to catch up afterwards. It's like in jiu-jitsu, if you roll, you will start doing things before that you ever really figure out why you're doing them. Like you'll just start doing stuff because it feels right, seems to work. And then later on, you'll kind of like look at it, and you'll be able to more think about it conceptually, and with your head be able to think, oh, this is why I'm doing this, that, or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
But usually the body figures it out sooner. And so a lot of times with humans in our transformations, we start transforming ourselves and we do the actions that are required and everything else. But a lot of times our head takes a little bit longer to accept that we have transformed ourselves and that we are a new person.
Yeah. Or even believing that, like believing that you're actually become this better or different version of yourself.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Hopefully I gave you an idea. I'm making Eugene laugh right now because I was messing with him. I said today's podcast is brought to you by cough drops, by Luden's cough drops. Luden's the only brand I can think of. Luden's cough drops. Those things were like candy. You ever had one?
I think so.
Luden's, Luden's was they used to make the cherry ones. Their cough drops, air quotes, literally taste like lifesavers. I was like, this is just a lifesaver. This isn't a cough drop. This is candy. You made candy and told someone it was like cough drops. It's it's like what is it? Chicken noodle soup and Sprite and 7-Up and stuff. Like why?
Yeah.
Why is that like what we're supposed to, eat when we're sick? But like literally, like when you have some chicken noodle soup or some soup, and you have like a little bit of ginger ale or some Sprite when you're sick, and crackers, it makes you feel better, even though it's absolute crap food.
Dude, that's what the doctors would tell you to do.
I know, it's just funny though. Like, why?
I remember as a young kid, the doctor's like, go get, my parents would go to the store and buy 7-Up. And I would like drink a little, like, little cupful every so often, I'm like, why am I doing that?
It's like, why am I digesting sugar and copious amounts of sodium? Like, sodium, salt's fine, but like, what's the big deal? I mean, actually the salt would probably be helpful if you had like some diarrhea or like whatever. But like when I had, I remember the last time I actually got sick when I had COVID, like last year, I remember I couldn't taste anything, but I was just like putting in like beef and eggs and like good food. I was like, I got to get good nutrients into my body. I was like, I'm not messing with that soup. Plus I can't taste it anyway. So, anyway, random off the topic.
That's right.
Tangent. Anyway, speaking of medicine and supplements and all that type of stuff, thanks to our sponsor, Charlotte's Web, who makes amazing CBD supplements that are third-party tested to ensure the actual quantities of what you're receiving in the dosages, as well as the purity of what's actually in that bottle when you take it, so that you can be ensured that you are actually getting what's in that bottle. What it says is in that bottle is what you're actually putting into your body. And again, for those of you that have ever thought about taking CBD, but you're worried about testing positive or whatever, because you have zero tolerance issues with the testing, check out their new product. It's their CBD Sports Daily Edge product. It's endorsed by the Major League Baseball League, and it's also NSF certified. So basically, NSF is a third-party company that essentially make sure that supplements do not have banned substances in them. And this way, if you're someone that's in the Olympics, if you're in like the UFC or different professional organizations, you can take those supplements without being tested positive for the banned substances. So for a lot of you guys, look into it, check out their website and see if it's right for you. If you want to try their stuff, but you've been worried, I know this has been an issue for a lot of people. They've been worried about taking it and possibly testing positive for THC or something, right? And so again, this one is formulated to not test positive for that stuff. And it still has the way that they process it. It's not done with the isolates. It's still done with the, I forgot the term that they use, but basically they're telling us a lot of times the CBD or the THC free products are made with isolates. So they don't contain the terpenes and all these different like chemicals that help make CBD work effectively. Right. And so this product still contains those. And so you'll still get a lot of the beneficial properties that regular CBD has, just you don't have to worry about the THC issue. So again, check it out at their website at charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Chewjitsu20 to get 20% off the order. Again, that's CHEWJITSU 20 to get 20% off. And guys, if you want to get some really cool jiu-jitsu gear, jiu-jitsu merch, t-shirts, shorts, rash guards, check out my buddy Matt at his website, epicrollbjj.com. If you go to his website, again, there's lots of stuff that he has. I really like a lot of his t-shirts. They're comfortable. He has a lot of cool designs. He also has male and female shirts for men and women. Right. And if you guys want to check out his nogi stuff, his nogi rash guards and shorts are really nice. I made a batch with my jiu-jitsu logos and stuff on it. I plan to do another one of those next year. And again, his nogi shorts, what I really like about them is they don't have the big Velcro thing. Because a lot of times I'll have shorts where the Velcro wears out way before the actual shorts do. But because the Velcro is all torn up, you can't really do anything with them. So again, check them out at epicrollbjj.com. And if you'd like to save some money, some green stuff, you can use the promo code Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off. And guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can go to our website at Patreon. Or not our website, it's the Patreon's website.
It's kind of our website.
It's not our website. It's theirs. It's patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And if you guys subscribe to the Patreon, you'll get access to all the exclusive content we've been adding for over 3 years at this point. And along with that, you will get 2 free bonuses that you get access to instantly. One is going to be a 20-minute warm-up routine specifically designed by Eugene for jiu-jitsu practitioners. Again, you have a doctor, almost went to being 4-year-old Chewy. You got a doctor of physical therapy who knows the body incredibly well and is also a black belt in jiu-jitsu who understands what we deal with, right? So instead of having someone that's like, you shouldn't train jiu-jitsu, it's like, no, keep training, but here's a tool that could be very useful to you. He put together a 20-minute routine that'll go through very specific exercises and stretches specifically for us and our muscular imbalances and issues, things like tight hips, low back, shoulders, the normal culprits, which then also that helps the knees when we're loosening up those hips and the low back and everything else. We can stretch those ankles out, help the knees. Again, gets into all of it. If you want to check it out, get it at the Patreon. And along with that bonus, you'll also get another bonus, which is a gi and no-gi seminar that I did a few years back where I go into basically some of my best techniques. I show them in the gi, and I also show how they could convert possibly to no-gi and vice versa. Some of them don't convert either or, but some of them do. And it can be a really interesting one for good techniques that if you want to learn, like things like side control, scapes, and guard passes to back takes, all this kind of stuff. But along with that, you can see how you can learn the grip changes where, okay, like if I do a technique like this particular move and I don't have that grip, what's something I could use in lieu of that? And I get into some of that. So again, check that out at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And last but not least, guys, if you want to join my Chew Crew email list and get my daily email newsletter, you can do so by joining up at chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. Again, that's CHEWJITSU.net, because .com mistaken. /join, JOIN. And if you guys join up, you'll get access to 3 free ebooks. One is on game plan development for your jiu-jitsu. One is for drilling. And then one is for at-home workouts and study. So I created it during the lockdown, corona quarantine stuff. And everybody was like, hey, I can't train. What's something I could do? So I put together some at-home workouts that you can do, some solo drills for jiu-jitsu that you can use. And I also put in there a list of ideas for studying jiu-jitsu at home, all of which could be useful to you, whether or not you're locked down with the Rona or not. And so, guys, that's the podcast today. Hopefully there was something in that podcast that got your wheels thinking, your noggin turning, and maybe will prove a useful idea for you to chew on for your jiu-jitsu and maybe for your life as well. So again, thank you guys so much for being here, and we will talk to you next week.